Welcome back to the program, guys, and thank you so much for being here. We have joining us today someone who I first discovered on social media and found her to be quite the prolific writer. So I followed her on Substack, and I got to tell you, her articles are quite impressive, well thought out, well read, well researched. The website is impressive as well. There's a lot of stuff there if you're not crazy about Google. And for me personally, I use the comment browser with Perplexity and that kind of stuff. And it's AI stuff, but still, it helps with research. Rachel Hurley is now running for Congressional District 5, I believe he's in Tennessee. She hails from Memphis. Rachel, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, I'm glad you can make it. I've been thinking about it for quite some time, and then you hit this, campaign trail, and I say, well, I got to get her on. I have several other candidates from around the state of Florida scheduled, trying to get it. And of course, everybody's out there, boots on the ground right now, coming up to the primaries, and it's hard to squeeze in 30 minutes. I know, so thank you.
Oh, of course.
Now, before we jump right in feet first into the political end of it, your campaign and that kind of thing, what was it that made you switch gears and from a former life into being an opinionated writer?
Well, I've always been an opinionated writer. Some people may not know the full path that led me to all this, but I started a blog back in 2003 called Rachel and the City. And I
Right.
started it in New York when I lived there. And it was supposed to be about my life in New York and how it was so different than the show Sex and the City, right? Because that was like during that time. And I still had a lot of friends all over. I hadn't been in New York very long. I had friends from all over the country that, we would call and talk on the phone, and they would be like, what is it like to live in New York? And I would always be like, well, not like what it's on television. So I originally started that blog to kind of chronicle how my life was up there. But I don't want to get too far off track, but I did live 2 blocks from the World Trade Center when it got hit.
Yeah.
And that was a totally life-changing event. And I couldn't get out of my rental agreement with my apartment company. So we had to stay down there, and we had just signed a 2-year lease. And when that lease was finally up towards the end of 2004, I decided to move back to Memphis because it had just become too crazy up there, especially living right at the door of Ground Zero. That fence was right outside the door of my apartment. And so what I originally had started that blog to be about, kind of what it was like living in the city and working in film and television kind of fell off a little bit because of the things that happened while I was there. I ended up moving back to Memphis, and then I started writing about kind of Memphis nightlife and Memphis culture and that kind of thing. And that's when that site really took off. And I was very opinionated on that website about things happening in Memphis and my thoughts on everything. And it ended up winning Best Blog in Memphis for like 3 years in a row.
There you go.
And during that time, I also started a music blog, and that got a lot of recognition. It got written about in like Rolling Stone and Spin, and I got interviewed in the Wall Street Journal, and I was getting flown all over the place as like an influencer. I remember Microsoft flew me out to Seattle to test the Zune. If anybody remembers the Zune.
I do.
That was their version of the iPod. And Holland.com flew like 20 bloggers over to Amsterdam and just told us to like take a vacation and write about it. And so it was a whole lot of kind of really fun stuff like that. And I turned that into an opportunity to write about music for the Commercial Appeal, which was the paper of record in Memphis, still is, but it's owned by USA Today now. But that turned into a music column that I wrote for several years. And then I was kind of recruited by John Fry, who owned Ardent Studios, to come work there and kind of get them on board with social media and the internet. This was back in 2007 or so. And I worked there for a long time and continued to freelance write for various publications. But I mostly always wrote feature stories. I've always read a lot of biographies and been interested in people and history and that kind of thing. I've never been a fiction reader. I'm always a
Me
nonfiction
neither.
reader.
Me
'Cause
neither.
I'm just more interested in things that actually happened. And then that turned into me leaving there, going back to school, finishing a degree in graphic design, and then being recruited by a PR firm. And then a few years after that, I opened up my own PR firm. And I had that for probably the last 6 or 7 years of my career in music. And that was a very fulfilling job in terms of helping people uh, reach their goals.
Right.
Musicians, who wanted to be in Rolling Stone or Billboard or whatever it was,
Right.
that was a really fun experience of helping people, get something that they just always dreamt about, right? To be able to
Right.
say, hey, you're in Rolling Stone this week. It was, and I mostly got to, go around and go to concerts and shows and hang out with
Hmm.
musicians and travel, go to, festivals and showcases. And,
Yeah.
it's kind of like a, a dream come true for me, for someone who just always really enjoyed music and wanted to be
Yeah.
around musicians.
Yeah.
And so that's what I was doing, and it was going well, and I was successful, and I was, making good money. And then January 6th happened. I'm sure you
Right.
probably remember where you were when that happened.
I was
Everybody
I
kind of
was
does.
My first co-host and I, Shelton Hall, he's the writer, the journalist. Him and I were actually in our little studio on the other side of town, getting
Mhm.
ready to record a couple of episodes. And our producer was in his booth and all that, and he had several big TV screens up there in front of him, right? And
Mhm.
he's got the recording, set up in that platform on one screen, and then he's got the outdoor security cameras on another
Right,
screen, and then this great big old screen right above him, above his desk. Boom, J6.
right,
And we just
right,
stopped. We sat there and watched the whole damn thing all afternoon and completely didn't even record anything. We just we
right,
watched it. And we watched it on several news channels. He took all the different screens and put them on different channels to see how different people were covering it.
right. And
Yeah.
that's basically what I did too. I've always had a, pretty, I wouldn't say popular, but, I've always had social channels that I've posted to about various things, and had,
Hmm.
people that followed me and interacted and comments and everything. But that day I sat on my couch all afternoon, and I was just posting to Facebook all my thoughts and that things
Hmm.
that were happening. The next day, because I could see that a lot of people were only getting their news from Facebook. They really weren't
Yep.
watching the
Yeah.
news, they weren't reading
Right.
papers. And the next day I started doing this news update. It was called the RATC News Update, Rachel in the
Hmm.
City News Update. And I basically would wake up every morning and just, scroll through and read all the top stories at all the
Right.
different big press outlets. And I would write like a 10 highlight of 10 news stories. And it would be just like the headline and like 2 or 3 sentences of what was happening in that story.
Hmm.
And people really liked that. They liked to be able to like go one
Sure.
place, get everything all at once and feel like they were informed. And I just kept doing that for a long time. And it just gained, more and more followers for a
Hmm.
while. Then when Biden was back in and things kind of cooled off for a little while, then, I kind of just went back to writing more about or posting about my musician clients and writing about thoughts about music and that kind of stuff. And I remember
Hmm.
I did write this one Spotify essay that went viral and got picked up by a lot of magazines and stuff. And that was kind of my first taste of, because I was in the creator program. I had been asked to be in it very early on, but I wasn't really paying attention to it. And that particular essay, I got a little nice check from. And I was like, okay. And so after I started writing more about politics again in the summer of 2024, when the presidential election was going on, and I really did not think that Trump was going to be reelected.
Yeah.
I just could not see it happening. I
Hmm.
just thought it was impossible. And I remember the night of the election, I wrote this long essay about, okay, everybody's freaking out, but I think it's all going to be okay. There's no way that he's going to be reelected. It's impossible.
Yeah, right.
And I woke up the next day and was completely wrong. And I think I wrote the next day, well, I obviously don't know anything. So I'm
Right.
just going to like shut up about all this. Right. But then, within like, I think I took a break for like a month and then started seeing the, new headlines about what was going to happen when he did come back into the White House. And I started writing a little more and a little more, and people started following more. More people
Hmm.
started following me. More people started following
Sure.
me. And
Sure.
then when 2025 came up, I was writing like these long essays every day about, stuff that was going to happen and things that were wrong and all that kind of stuff. And pretty much within 2 or 3 months, I gained like 100,000 followers from writing all that stuff.
Yeah.
And, it seemed like there was something crazy happening every single day.
Yeah. Still
And it
is.
felt right. But at the time, I was still trying to do music PR too, and it kind of felt to me like, I don't know, it kind of felt shallow for me to be pitching music when all this crazy stuff was going on. Like, hey, I know the whole world's falling apart, but check out this new song. And I didn't feel like I was giving enough attention to my clients because I was like reading the news and watching the TV all day long, like, trying to keep up with everything that was going on. And as I gained more and more followers, I was like, you know what? I think that I should just do this for a while because I think this is
Sure.
more important than the music PR stuff. I just felt
Hmm.
like we were in a special moment in time, and whatever I was writing, people were connecting with. And, I'd created kind of a community in my comments of all these people that came every single day to discuss what was happening. And so, about 3 months into 2025, I decided to close the agency and just write about music. I'm sorry, just write about politics.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And that's what I've been doing ever since. And I know this is a long-winded answer, but I'm wrapping it
No,
up.
no.
How it turned how it turned into me running for Congress was I just happened to be sitting. I live in a travel trailer. I've been traveling for 5 years. I come through back and forth through Memphis all the time and, might stay for a little while and then move on and just, I try to make it at like my home base, but I've been moving around a lot. I moved into the travel trailer during COVID because I didn't want to take airplanes to go see
Hmm.
clients in other cities, and kind of liked the I kind of liked being able to pick up and move to other places whenever I felt
Sure.
like it. But I just happened to have come back and parked inside Memphis so I could renew my tags, right? Because you have to have an address to renew your
Sure.
license plate and all that stuff. So I'd done that, and I just happened to be sitting there when I got the news about them doing the gerrymandering, the
Oh,
redistricting.
yeah.
And it just kind of felt like a crazy moment in time because I thought it was so crazy that it had happened and that I just happened to be sitting right in the district that now needed completely new leadership because Steve Cohen, who was the representative from Memphis, if he had decided to run, he would have been in District 9 after the redistricting. So there would not be an incumbent, right? There would not be somebody that I would be running against that was like from Memphis and had been doing this a long time. And several people that were going to run weren't even from Memphis. Some of them
Yeah.
have lived here for a while, but they were born and raised here like I was. And the leader in the Democratic race um, doesn't live in the district and doesn't live in Memphis. He's from
Yeah.
Columbia, and when they did the redistricting, they actually drew the district around his city. He's the mayor. They drew it around it. So, that kind of gerrymandering is cuckoo, cuckoo crazy.
It is cuckoo. Let me interject something real quick, kind of closely about not living in the area and that kind of thing. Well, I don't know if you've heard this. You probably have. My pillow guy, he's running in Minnesota.
Oh, yeah,
He wasn't even registered to vote.
right. You know
I'm
how it
not
is.
surprised. I'm not surprised.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, he is registered in
Well, you don't
Texas.
have Well, you don't have to live in the district now
Right.
to
Right.
run to represent it because they did the redistricting so quickly that if they had said, "Oh, and you can't run if you," because Chaz, Mulder, who's the Democrat, and Andy Ogles, who's the Republican, they were already running against each other for District 5 before the redistrict. And my theory is that Andy Ogles wasn't doing so well.
Mm-hmm.
And so they needed to redistrict to help him win the district. They just happened to have had to put Memphis in that district because District 5 was a rural district.
Mm-hmm.
But they had to put Memphis in it to dilute the votes in Memphis. And, a lot of the redistricting, they had to cut counties in half. But in Memphis, they had to cut the county twice. So they had to separate it into 3 to dilute that vote enough that a Republican could win to represent these districts.
They're all.
So anyway, that's what I decided.
Yeah, I mean, look at Florida.
Anyway,
I mean, they're Florida's following the same gerrymandering bullshit. Ron DeSantis, Trump wannabe. Listen, there's one thing I've noticed too that for some time now, you have talked quite a bit on your social channels and on Substack. You're Rachel in the City Substack. I'll leave the links below. About AI technology and in particular the data centers.
Mm-hmm.
That's been on a lot of people's minds. That's been on the radar of a lot of people around the country. And some cities have banned the building of them in certain areas. I actually saw a video the other day, and I forget the name of the town, but there was this huge data center that was using those turbines, which are quite loud.
Mm-hmm.
You just think of jet engines going off in your backyard. You know what I mean? So they've got these turbines going. This data center is literally across the street from a neighborhood. I find that just ridiculous. And I'm not against data centers because I'm an avid user of AI, both in images and research and all that kind of stuff. But the data centers can be a problem with their energy usage, their water usage, the impact on the communities they're involved in, and the noise pollution if you happen to live near one of them, and the environmental impact that it has, all that noise and all that stuff. Experts have said that it's harmful to the wildlife that may live in the area. Let's say you build a data center out in the middle of BFE and the wildlife are affected by it. So, I mean, what's your take? And I know you've got part of that within your plan going forward in your campaign has to do with the data centers and xAI in particular.
Yes, xAI's Colossus 1 and Colossus 2 just happened to be in District 5. And, I wasn't really paying that close attention when they kind of came down here and bought the land and started building. And this is it's a long, complicated story about what happened. Basically, the Chamber of Commerce worked with them. They didn't really tell the city that they were going to do anything. They didn't go through any kind of pilot program to get any tax incentives. They kind of just showed up and set up and didn't ask anybody any permission. And that's what a lot of people are upset about, is that they didn't have any public comment. They didn't have any say. But this is where it gets complicated. The area where Colossus 1 is, xAI, down in South Memphis near Boxtown, there are a lot of other plants down there. This isn't like pristine area or anything. There's Valero, which is an oil refinery. There's a chemical plant. I believe there's like a dry cleaning plant. There's probably like 10 different plants down there around that area. And so the air issues in Memphis, this is not something new. It's not something that xAI brought to the city, right? And after they opened up the first data center, Colossus 1, well, even though it seems like there was a lot of pushback from the community, it wasn't as much pushback as you would think, because they ended up allowing them to build a second data center down in Whitehaven, which is Colossus 2. And that one is even more crazy the way it's set up, because the data center is in Tennessee, but the power plant, they bought a non-working power plant that was across the state line, and it's in Mississippi. It's in South Haven, right? So now you've got this one thing and you've got 2 different sets of laws over them, right? So let's just focus on Colossus. let's just focus on Colossus 1 first. So obviously, a lot of people are very upset about data centers and very upset
Sure.
about air and water issues. And so I kind of dug into all of the research because my thought was, okay, if all of this is true, if this is so bad, why isn't anyone doing anything about it? Right? Who do we hold responsible? Because
Sure.
my thought process was always, why are people so mad at xAI? Because Elon Musk is just Elon Musking. Who we should be upset with are the people that we put in charge that should have been able to say no to things, that should be able
Sure.
to, they allowed this. Elon Musk couldn't have come in and just done any of this without help from the people that are in charge here in Memphis. And those
Sure.
are the people that can stop things or change things, right? So I started really looking into it all. And the first thing that I came across was with the water issue. A lot of people don't really understand the way that the water issue works. They think that the water's being poisoned or the water's being hurt because it is over the sand aquifer. But that's not really how it works. First of all, xAI has a closed loop and an open loop system. The closed loop system allows the water to be recirculated and recirculated, so they're not using as much as they would if they were just like running water through it all the time. The water's used to cool down the GPUs, right?
Right.
And the water that they're using is about 831,000 gallons a day, which sounds like a huge amount. But the contract that they have with MLG&W is for up to 1.3 million gallons a day.
Whew.
So that's MLG&W is Memphis Light Gas and Water. They wrote a contract with xAI saying this is how much water you can use, based on our understanding of how much water we have. And, they wrote the rules for all that. So right now they're using way less than they could be. And basically after the water, they're done with it, it goes out into the Mississippi. It's not being like put back into anything. It's not going into the ground or anything. It's the same thing that happens with the wastewater plant down there. And they are building a gray water plant, which they did put on pause. But once they build that, then what it's going to do is take the wastewater from the wastewater plant and clean it more because it's still too dirty to use, but it will clean that and turn it into gray water. And then they'll use some of that water too to be able to cut down on their usage even more. Now, here's another thing. The sand aquifer has 56 trillion gallons of water in it. MLG&W uses about 150 million gallons per day and has been for decades. So xAI is using less than 1% of what they already use. There's already chemical plants that are using 10 times as much as xAI. I think that them building the gray water plant is a great idea to help them use less, but the water issue to me is not as big of a deal as it is in other places. I'm not saying that water isn't an issue with data centers. I'm saying the water at xAI is not as big of a deal as it might be in other areas where they might need to protect that water more because of they might, they have limited amounts of it. But we've got 56 trillion gallons. So that to me is not as big of an issue. Then I looked into the air quality issues. And what I found was there are 4 studies, and they're kind of beating their heads against each other because the city did a study with the University of Memphis, and I believe they were part of 2 studies, and they say that the air quality is not an issue. Like there's not enough of an uptick for it to be problematic because the data center is over a mile from any of the houses. Mm-hmm. And then there were these other studies that were done that, had more of a, negative viewpoint and said other things. But with each of these studies, different experts have pointed to, well, this is why this study is problematic. Like this University of Memphis study is problematic because it was only done on 2 days and it didn't determine the way the wind was blowing, right? Because if the wind's blowing one way and not the other way on a certain day, then it's not blowing towards the people living there. And then another nonprofit that did these studies well, they weren't using the same EPA qualified instruments that should be used for these kind of studies. So every single study is lacking in some way. And a big issue is, like I said, because there are so many other entities down in that area, it's very hard to determine if like the extra CO in the air or the problems in the air are coming from, the Valero oil refinery, which they've been breaking EPA laws. They've been there since 1940. Or is it from xAI, or is it from TVA? Because they're using coal down there. So the big problem is that we need more studies. We need better studies to actually, measure every single thing that was problematic in these other studies.
Mm-hmm.
Because from what my research shows, that if they close down xAI tomorrow, it wouldn't make the air in South Memphis better because it was already bad,
Sure.
And I think that's what we need to focus on, because a lot of people want to talk about the air is bad, the water's bad. But until you can find that smoking gun, until you can show in a study that, hits every single thing, then you can't hold the entity that's in charge of this accountable. And so the studies that have been done that the Shelby County Health Department have been involved with, they're saying everything's cool. And then these nonprofit studies that are saying, oh no, this is problematic. But if there's problems with all of these studies, who wins, And until we can do something that shows a smoking gun of, yes, this is the issue. It's coming from this entity, whether it be the oil refinery, whether it be the chemical plant, whether it be xAI, then that's how you move forward on fixing the issue, when you can actually pinpoint the issue. Now, a bigger issue to me is that the EPA actually awarded South Memphis, over $400,000 in 2024 for an air substation that's still not up and running. And it's supposedly supposed to happen, I think it was supposed to happen in May and June, and it still hasn't happened. So that's someone that we can be holding accountable. Where is this air substation that the EPA already awarded the money for in 2024? And I believe personally that every data center should come with its own air substation and its own noise substation, so that they are measuring it. And based on what the measure is, if the noise is too loud, they can put up these, soundproof barriers around them. If the air quality is too low, then they can change the amount of time that they can use gas turbines, because the gas turbines were supposed to be a backup because they couldn't pull enough power off the grid. But now they've turned it into something that they're doing all the time.
Yeah.
And I just think there's a lot of misinformation out there, because I've read a lot of the press around it, and I've read residents saying that they can smell a cabbage smell. That's not xAI, that's TVA. So I think all of these different entities down there are getting combined and into this, they're blaming everything down there on xAI.
Right.
It's not like I'm trying to defend xAI at all. What I'm saying is we need to pinpoint the issues, and then we can go to the people that are supposed to hold these entities accountable and force their hand. But as long as all of this information is kind of so wishy-washy, that's why nothing can be done. And I don't think anyone that has been, an activist against all of these things has done the work to do the research, to pinpoint the issue, to figure out what the next step is, so that we can actually move forward and fix this. It's been more like, it's been a lot of revelry. It's been a lot of, just a lot of talk. It hasn't been like, okay, how do we fix it? And I think that a lot of people still think that there's some way that they're just going to close xAI down. And that's just not how things work. We don't have any mechanism to just close down a business. And if you look at other businesses that do have health problems caused by, air issues or air quality or whatever, what they usually do is they just fine them, right? And if there's anyone who has the money to pay the fines, it's probably Elon Musk. So I just think we need to dig deeper and look more into the actual causes that we can pinpoint, find the smoking gun, figure out the entity that oversees that, and then put pressure on them to help make changes. Whether that's like, if you like pass regulations a certain amount of times and it's a fine, and then if you pass it so many times, then you get shut down for a week, or you keep passing, then you get shut down for a month. That's the way that it's going to work. It's not going to be that they just shut down the whole company. Not to mention that they've spent $2 billion down there building these 2 data centers.
Sure.
And there's way too much money in politics for anyone to be able to just shut them down. And so that's been my pragmatic look at the entire AI situation, is that there are obviously lots of issues on the whole for every entity of it, right? But I like to say the pea's already in the pool. So we have to be pragmatic about regulation and start thinking about regulation and start really putting in the work now. Because if you look at our history and every other situation like this, whether it be the railroads or the power stations or everything else, the Industrial Revolution brought us a lot of great things, but it also brought us 80-hour work weeks. It also brought us child laborers. And it took decades for us to regulate that out of the system. So if we were smart, we would go ahead and start thinking about regulation now instead of arguing about whether it should exist. It does exist. Let's start putting the regulations around it so it doesn't harm people. Now, I totally believe that communities should be able to say whether or not they want data centers, and there should be a public portion of that. And that's why if I go to Congress, I would vote for the AI Transparency Act, which says that data center has to come 6 months in advance. It has to do like outreach to the community and tell everyone they're coming. They have to do air quality and water quality studies. They have to say how much power they're going to use. They have to do all of that stuff ahead of time and make sure that the community wants it before they just show up and they're there already. But another issue that I see, especially with xAI, and I could talk about this for a long time, I'm sorry, but I've thought about it a lot.
Cool. Yeah.
The issue is that, especially since I'm running for Congress, people don't seem to understand that xAI is a city, county, and state issue. They're the ones that are overseeing it. It's not a federal issue because the federal government cannot write a law against xAI. There's actually a clause in the Constitution against that. I believe it's called the Attainment Clause, that the federal government cannot pinpoint one company and write a law just for them. So all I can really do is write a law that affects, or vote on a law that affects all data centers across the country. And even if you look at the EPA, I've done record requests from the EPA, and they say that they fund different local entities to do the testing and the oversight. So they kick it right back down to the Shelby County Health Department. I kind of just said, so even I've done record requests from the EPA, and what they say is that they fund local entities to do testing and oversight. So they kick it right back down to the Shelby County Health Department. So the fact is, if you're really looking for a solution to these issues, you've got to first know who the oversight is being done by and what needs to be done to get them to step in. And if they're not breaking any laws, then they're not going to step in. If they are breaking laws, then we need to be able to prove that they're breaking laws and then show that information to the entity that's overseeing it.
Right. Well, I tell you what, you've got a lot to talk about. You've got a lot going on there in Memphis. In your district alone, you've got your hands full, and the primaries are right around the corner. So in closing, give me your closing thoughts. What is the argument, if one at all, to a voter who happens to have been following you, and you said you've got hundreds of thousands of followers across social platforms, for a voter who loves your writing and your posts and staying, up to date with current affairs that you're very good at, that a writer, but that person maybe had doubts that someone, a writer, for instance, and that's what a lot of people would just they wouldn't see beyond that title. They would see, oh, she's a writer on social media. How can a writer with a large following navigate Congress?
Well, what is a writer? It's someone who is good
Yeah,
at communication, right?
yeah,
And so that's the number one job that you have as a
sure,
representative,
sure,
is being able to communicate things to your constituents. And one reason why people follow me is I think that I'm able to break things down simply so that
hmm,
anyone can read through it and understand the issues and see both the
sure,
positive and the negatives of that. And, the other part of my job history is being a publicist. And what
yeah,
does a publicist do? They come up with a narrative and they sell it to people. That's
right,
what I used to do all day, every day, is figure out the story of someone and write it in a way to sell that story to someone and make them interested enough to write about one of my clients. This is why
sure,
my client is interested. This is why you should be writing about this person now. This is why people should be paying attention. And that's the exact same thing that a person in
sure.
Congress would be doing, is talking about issues and bills and legislation and explaining it to people about why this is important, why we need to be acting now, and getting people to be on their side.
Hmm.
It's just you're talking about legislation and laws rather than Americana and country music.
Right.
But it's the same basically.
Yeah, I think anyone with half a functioning brain can read your material and figure out that, hey, this lady's got a head on top of her shoulders. God knows the current administration. I mean, if they can put people like Hegseth and Janine Pirro in office, I don't know what to say.
Well, my main goal through this whole thing is people are not people can understand issues if you can
Hmm.
lay them out simply. And there's a
Sure,
famous quote about, if you don't understand something well enough to tell it in a simple manner, then you don't understand it well enough. And
sure.
so I think a lot of people, especially politicians, they have this mindset that, oh, well, the common person won't even understand what all of this means or what all of this is. And so I'm just going to, talk around it so I don't really have to explain it. So maybe even I don't even have to show that I don't really understand it. But I think we've been in a situation way too long where our leaders don't really understand things that they are legislating. And that is especially true about AI. You know,
Yeah,
AI is very complex and tech, you know, there's just a lot going on with it, and
sure.
we're in deep trouble if we do not get some people in power that understand it in a pragmatic way,
Right.
in a way that says, I understand that our entire economy is propped up on this right now, and that's its own issue itself, right?
Sure.
But there are also some very easy to see problems that these things are going to cause. And so we need to start putting up the guardrails now, and we don't need to wait like we always have until there's a huge issue and we have to play cleanup. Like, there was a AI task force set up in 2024. It was a bipartisan commission in Congress, and they all came together. They put together like 85 recommendations. Most of them were for how the government should be using AI. I think only like 7 of them were about how AI might affect people. And we know now that it's been changing and moving so quickly that we're already way behind. So I think
Sure.
we need to have a permanent AI task force in Congress, AI task force in Congress.
Sure. Yeah, I agree.
Pay attention constantly about everything that's going on and start thinking through before they happen to us. Because, we're pretty smart as the human race. We've been able to keep ourselves alive this long. So we need to go ahead and start thinking through these issues and start figuring out the solutions before we're already harmed.
Right. I totally agree. Well, listen, Rachel, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I wish you all the luck in the world up there in your campaign and the candidacy and everything up there. Listen, I tell you what, when you're before you walk into the ballroom to have your victory party,
right?
Yeah, give us a shout out.
I sure will. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, stick around for just a minute. Well, that's a wrap. Another great episode of the Contrast Project Lounge podcast, One World. Don't forget to like, share, drop us a comment, smash all those subscribe buttons, follow along for more. And until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Peace.